One of the things that I really remember growing up in Hinton, in small town Alberta, in the 70s and in the 80s, was local hockey. So we had a local hockey team called the Hinton Hawks, and my uncle played on the hockey team, and he was a forward, and he scored a lot of goals. He was a good offensive forward, and he played really well, and was he was one of those guys that was really quite a popular guy, well known in the community for his hockey playing, but also, I mean, he grew up there, and he worked in the pulp mill and stuff like that. And so as a kid, we used to go, as a family, we would go watch the local hockey team on Saturday nights, and yeah, the local arena would be filled with cheering fans, cheering on the Hinton Hawks as they would play Jasper. Right, Jasper had a hockey team, and then the next town over was Edson. Edson had a hockey team, and then Whitecourt had a team, and Drayton Valley and Fox Creek and all these little Alberta towns had these teams, and then every once in a while there'd be a tournament. So all these teams would come from a small town Alberta and even into BC, right? And they'd come for these tournaments, and I'll never forget. So I'm going to tell this story. So this will give you an idea. And so hockey was a bit different of a game in the 70s and 80s. It was still a lot rougher, and even at the local level, this was full contact hockey. This, I guess in modern terms, I didn't know it at the time, but this would be considered Allen Cup level. So some of you out there who are hockey fans, you know what I mean when I say Allen Cup, right? Allen Cup is amateur hockey, and it's played, full contact, but it's local kind of stuff, right? Not that the Hinton Hawks or any of those teams were competitors for the Allen Cup. But it was that level, right? It was taken seriously in the community. So there was a tournament this one year. I can't remember when it was. I think it was possibly 81. And so along with the normal communities that were in I can't remember the name of the league, or the West Central Hockey League or something like that. So the league consisted of Hinton, Jasper, Whitecourt, Grand Cache, Drayton Valley, Fox Creek, Mayerthorpe, all these communities. But in this tournament, a couple of towns from BC, or a couple hours over, Valemont and McBride are these two little communities in BC that are kind of just across the border, not far away, nestled in the mountains. They're very beautiful areas, but they're small little communities, right? And a lot of them, they're one-horse towns, right? They're sawmill towns, and so they're not too big, right? I venture that maybe 2,000-3,000 people, maybe 5,000 people, some of them. So one of those teams, and I'm not sure which one, I think it might have been McBride, they had a team in this, and they didn't have like they had as many players as would come, but they only had, I think, if I remember correctly, they only had like enough players for like 2 lines. So those of you who maybe don't know hockey real well, a line is 5 skaters, right? So they had maybe they had 12 players, 2 lines, 2 skating lines. So 6 forwards, 4 defensemen, and maybe, I think one of them, they only had 1 goalie, which I think you're not supposed to. You're supposed to have 2, right? You always kind of had to have a backup. But anyways, compared to the larger communities in Alberta, Hinton, Grand Cache, Edson, that had a full, I think, 20-man roster, or I try to think now. Usually, there's 12 forwards, 6 defensemen, and 2 goalies. So yeah, like a 20-man roster. So this team from McBride, they were actually pretty good. They did okay in the tournament. Their goalie was a hacker, right? So when some of you will remember some of the goalies from the old days of the NHL, Ron Hextall and Billy Smith, who, if you got in front of them, they'd hit you with their stick or cross-check you or something like this. And so this goalie from McBride, he was a hacker, right? And he got a lot of penalties during the tournament. And so, but they were a good enough team that they made their way into the playoffs. After the round robin, they made their way into the playoffs. And so they're facing Grand Cache, right? I'll never forget this game. So they're facing Grand Cache, and Grand Cache was, the teams had personalities back then, and Grand Cache was this rough, tough, hard-hitting team that fought a lot, got a lot of penalties, and they were a rough team. I don't know that I mean, they scored goals too and had some finesse players, but they were known more as a hard hitting, fighting team, right? So they in this tournament is like I don't know what round, maybe the semifinal or whatever. Grand Cache is facing McBride. McBride's only got like 10 players. Grand Cache has a full roster of like 20. And this goalie is hacking. And he's, he gets a penalty here and there. And somewhere, I think, towards the end of the second period, maybe into the third period, they're behind by a goal or something. And this goalie's fighting it out and doing all this stuff. And I don't know how this happened, but there ends up with a bench clearing brawl, right? So McBride clears their bench, and they're like all 10 of their players are out on the ice. And of course, Grand Cache, they open up their doors, and like their 10 toughest players go out, and they just beat the crap out of these poor guys from McBride all over this goalie who couldn't stop fucking whacking people, right? And so I think it's maybe one of the few times in my life that I've seen a bench clearing brawl in hockey.